What do a manga about the cosmic schemes of a sinister seductive squid and another on the consequences of a post-apocalyptic mukbang have in common? Correct. Incest. In the second quarter of 2024, Jump Plus published the first chapters of two new series, Centuria and Mad. I've been told there are others, but I cannot bring myself to care about anything which involves neither suffering nor siblings kissing. Besides being published at similar times and having a gene pool shallow enough to wade through, what do Mad and Centuria have in common to justify cramming them into the same video? Nothing. I wrote scripts for both, neither was long enough to be worth releasing, and I keep struggling to write about fucking Sunny Boy! Monkeying around aside, what really makes both of the manga interesting to talk about are the ways that they're so different. Every way one of them succeeds, the other seems to fail. If you have a drinking problem, or you're like me and drinking is the solution, then take a shot every time I say that something about Centuria and Mad are completely opposite, and by the end of this video you'll have such potent jaundice that your skin will be yellow enough to give your grandpa Vietnam flashbacks. Despite what I said, 1 minute ago, let me be fair, Mad doesn't actually contain any incest. I know, I was disappointed too. What it does contain is a post-apocalyptic sci-fi setting, a protagonist with sister-based psychosis and a below-average number of arms, a psych ward worth of unstable superpowered women in bathing suits, and a coercive cannibal cuddle cult. If any of what I just said devastated you like estrogen devastated inner-city Thai communities, then congratulations on having read Fire Punch. Your reward? Lifelong suicidal ideation. Like and subscribe if you too stare into the abyss and dread the day that it finally stares back. Now, before you tongue-punch that Beretta 1301, you might find a copyright-infringingly large number of similarities in Mad. And if you're worried I've spoiled too much, then don't worry. Mad is perfectly happy to steal from H.R. Geiger as well. The manga follows John, God's silliest cripple, running away from his strongest pit bulls, before he's saved by the JSDF and shipped off to Unit 731, where nothing bad has ever happened, but if it did, then they were probably Chinese, so who really cares? As for Centuria, the wills of the primal forces, which control the lives of man as if they were mere pawns within their eldritch games, converge upon two people. A 14-year-old slave boy and his infant sister. Chosen by the dark goddess of the ocean and given her blessing, the rest of their lives they shall be forced to dance to the discordant tune of things beyond their comprehension, fated to a life of constant strife, danger, and a pet goat. Centuria has an art style to match its premise, while Mad is fully deserving of the title Fujimoto-esque, which is a polite way of saying I've seen better line work from a spider on THC. The last time I saw a weighting problem as bad as Mad's art, it involved Sonic the Hedgehog, a bicycle pump, and a beloved childhood YouTuber. That paired with the overall looseness of the line work makes the finer details difficult to distinguish and the panels as indecipherable as Chinese history. Did you know that Emperor Xuanzong kept a zoo of mutants? If you ask me, he had the right idea. He knew what the gnomes were capable of, and now we've let them infiltrate the highest levels of government. Who do you think put those doors in the White House? Comparing the first to some of the more recent chapters is like comparing a Punjabi marriage to informed consent. While the early art looks more like a psychometric test than a manga, some of the later chapters are almost competent. In particular, the character art is incredibly expressive. The simple designs allow for a wide range of facial expressions from mild indigestion to intestinal activity on a seismic scale, all of which goes a long way to making the characters more endearing. There are also some more stylistic elements like the blurring of the foreground and background which, along with the paneling, plays a major part in adding a cinematic feel to the manga. The only thing that's gotten worse as Mad progresses is the backgrounds. While John was enjoying his stay at the Hepatitis Hotel, all meals included, they were simple in the same sense that Los Alamos had a few issues with workplace safety. The background art doesn't use any shading, meaning it's difficult to get any sense of depth even before you consider the poor visual clarity. That alone means half the manga looks like the cameraman is macrodosing concentrated corium. The visual effects become so muddied by the backgrounds they become visual defects, and adding motion is enough to make you throw up something that almost resembles the artwork. The worst part is that this is a deliberate choice, one that frankly should have seen the mangaka taken behind a shed at The Hague and shot. And to prove a point, the fan-made colorations of these scenes make them infinitely more digestible. The only saving grace is the surprisingly good paneling. Mad uses large, single-panel pages to emphasize small motions and their massive payoff. While the fight scenes would otherwise be something that I skip harder than history class in the month of February, these pages manage an astounding level of impact. It takes the fight scenes from hitting like a white belt to my dad's belt after he caught me playing Azure Lane. If you want to skip the next 2 minutes, then let me summarize. Centuria has the exact opposite of Mad's visuals. This is easiest to see in the scenery and backgrounds. The level of detail Centuria manages, even in some of the smaller panels, is astounding. Between the night sky, the ocean waves, and the dark forests, Centuria is beautiful. At least when the characters aren't on screen. Which way, Western man? Silverback gorilla or Semitic Goyan? Imagine you're watching Grave of the Fireflies, but the Americans start dropping default dancing crotch fungi instead of bombs. The proportioning of limbs, relative character sizes, even between panels on the same page, they're all way out of balance. Even if the character art was executed as effectively as a Soviet dissident, the designs would still stand out against the more realistic backgrounds. The creature designs work excellently because they actually use the same art style as the rest of the manga, and the characters in armor look fantastic. It's just that any time the mangaka has to draw a human face, they come out looking like their mothers drank alcohol while they were in the womb.
Oh, sweet Jesus!
The only time the characters look good is when they're bathed in shadow. Much like the ideal woman, Centuria's lighting and shading is thick, dark, and intimidating. Unlike said swarthy seductress, however, the shadows blend perfectly. Dark seas, the bedroom of a Hello Kitty girl, all of the places mankind was not meant to delve are given another level of presence thanks to how well Centuria uses its lighting. I only wish I could say the same about the paneling. Where Mad manages to elevate its subpar art into excellent fight scenes, I was bored enough by Centuria's panels that I was left stiffer than my last trip to the pediatrics department. That's not to say that they're bad. The choreography and page layout are just completely average. But compared to Mad, there were never any moments that made me feel like injecting 30 cc's of Trembolone into my eye and beating my infant son. Now, in case you were too busy enjoying that crayon casserole to pick up on the subtle foreshadowing, Mad takes a lot of inspiration from Fire Punch. Not just in surface level details, but also in the tone. The absurdist comedic elements contrast with the moments of the story that are darker than a friend's childhood story, which opens on their babysitter from Israel. On the other hand, the comedy in Mad only makes them hit harder, meaning it's relatively unique amongst manga for balancing both aspects so well. Outside of Tatsuki Fujimoto, that is. But Yusuke Otori doesn't use the power of levitation to break into psychiatric hospitals to ask mentally ill women to hit him with a bike. So you tell me who's really winning here. As far as pacing is concerned, Mad's story moves at the speed of government. Now, while I usually only like thinking of public servants when it involves an old-fashioned Maoist purge, this isn't actually a criticism. Especially in the early chapters, Mad takes its time to explore the characters and world, giving them space to develop and establish their stakes. Without taking that time, the story would be half as good as it is. Of course, the result of that is that it takes a while for the story to get anywhere. It takes 2 full volumes of John being enrolled in Shiro Ishii's summer camp before the real premise of the story picks up, and he's far from the only character to disappear for volumes at a time. Leon is the second victim of Mad's pacing and a walking tank who got lost on his way to the Vin Diesel lookalike contest. He serves as the face of Jericho, the survivalist colony which rescues John, and enrolls our intrepid protagonist in the new and improved Tuskegee Trials. Now, while you might assume that someone who gives out more infected gifts than Nurgle and the North Pole's Biological Warfare Department combined might have a personality to match, that's not quite the case. He's coercive and violent, but what makes him unique is his genuine love for everyone he hurts. Leon has complete and utter moral conviction to hurt people. He strikes the perfect balance between menace and comedy, and I only wish he would come back to the story sooner. I also feel obliged to mention that there's a chapter where he teaches you calisthenics, and only doesn't play his biceps like a rusty trombone because he couldn't find a valid hole. The rest of the cast varies in groundedness from Dommy Mommy Dragon Lady to normal, if quirky, people. The fact that they're regular people makes their struggles all the more interesting, and their quirks all the funnier. Most of the cast falls on the latter end of that scale, asymmetrically challenged protagonist included. While other characters can come across as bizarre for their idiosyncrasies, John acts in large part as the straight man to the rest of the world, and, more often than not, it's whipping bitch. At least, more so than whatever Lords of the Locker Room thing Leon has going on.
Endured the lash of the spanking.
Criticisms. I don't have any.
Nani?
Well,
way.
that's
We
not
got
entirely
not a
true.
chance.
Outside of the world and powers having all of the originality of store-brand tampons and the first chapter being about as entertaining as a rotation plastic, I don't have any significant issues. So, remember how I said Centuria is the complete opposite? Okay, before you type fast in the comment section with your mechanical keyboard and Reddit Gold Awards, let me give a disclaimer. Almost every criticism I have about Centuria is because it's a shonen battle manga. When I started reading both it and Mad, I was convinced Centuria was the better manga, but since then it's devolved into endless fights with the coherency of a politician's speech.
I was gonna put him.
Now, I don't usually give content warnings, but I must make an exception. Journalists. They, alongside other strains of subhumanity, have compared Centuria to Berserk, apparently ignoring that any good Berserk clone would include significantly more sensual non-consensual with homosexuals and horses alike. Now, I'm not saying that the only difference between good and bad manga is the Mr. Hand Stallion scene.
He's pulling his cock out!
But I am saying that Centuria does not have anywhere near the tone of Berserk. It seems too confused. The narrative is a fundamentally hopeful one, even after the protagonist is thrown into the fake self slave pits by his true self, Chud Masters. The manga is uplifting. At various points it tries to establish its setting as overwhelmingly grim, but the story is still about defying fate and found family. And while those moments do hit like untrained jihadi pilots, they can feel out of place. On the other hand, perhaps it's a good thing it tries to keep its serious tones, because most of its jokes fall flat, with the exception of some of the physical comedy. Thankfully, the world building doesn't fall into the same trap. Most of the interest lies with its eldritch gods, reflections of hostile, turbulent environments. And for some reason they're all women. Not that I'm complaining. Personally, I'd take any opportunity to be girl boss so hard I come out looking like industrial meat produce.
It should have been me!
Said strong, independent forces of nature are also the source of Centuria's many different powers, spanning the range from furry transformations to the least toxic Yuri relationship. No two powers are the same, and considerable attention is given to the ways that they shape the fights. And even when their powers aren't involved, the fight scenes are still intelligently written. The only real problem I have with the fight scenes is their length. As of writing this script, the manga has more chapters than I have IQ, and just like my funny brain number, over a third of it has been lost on a single fight. Part of the reason it's so stagnant is due to how frequently Centuria falls into flashbacks and tangents. In Mad, the fight scenes are short and punchy, rarely longer than a single chapter. Centuria is like listening to stories about your grandfather's work at NASA, but he keeps complaining that he wasn't allowed to write his papers in German. For those of you getting dangerously close to sobriety, Centuria's characters are the opposite of Mad's. Most of the characters are low concept, but they're kept interesting by their quirks, dry humor, and, in John's case, exploring his deeper trauma. Centuria, meanwhile, has high concepts for its cast, but doesn't deliver much depth. Take Julian, the femboy protagonist who becomes a single mother the second he is freed from slavery. What did he mean by this? Well, he's tasked with protecting one of the late slave's daughter after he gets superpowers from Lovecraft's even wetter dream, but by that point he's had all of the development he's received. The one occasion where it had the opportunity to drown him in so much emotional turmoil he'd lose one of his many lives to a rope and a chair was subverted in the least interesting way possible. Centuria's characters feel like a microcosm of the rest of the manga, competently realized, if ultimately uninteresting. If you were under any illusion that this video was remotely unbiased, then I hope you are recovering well from your lobotomy. If you just want to see some cool fights and nice art, then it would pair well with the post-operation ice cream. And in case you have the audio-visual processing of a geriatric lemming, Mad is many times better. Its visuals might be amateurish and its settings unoriginal, but Mad nails its writing and proves that a unique story told generically is worse than a generic story told uniquely. Perhaps I should be nicer to shonen fans. Ableism gets you arrested in the United Kingdom.